Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're literally stepping into the shoes of historical detectives to crack open a fascinating academic cold case. We're heading back to the ancient world to investigate the Israelite exodus from Egypt. Specifically, we're trying to unravel the timeline to figure out exactly when this monumental event actually happened. It's like a giant puzzle, one that's kept historians, archaeologists, and biblical scholars debating for decades.
All right, so here's our docket for today. We're going to look at 1. The Great Egyptian Mystery, 2. Mapping the New Kingdom, 3. The case for the early date, and finally 4. The case for the late date. It's a clear roadmap to help us untangle millennia of dynastic timelines and biblical clues. Let's get into it.
Okay, starting off with Section 1, the Great Egyptian Mystery. Now, before we can even begin to pin a date on this event, we really have to address the massive elephant in the room: the complete lack of Egyptian archaeological records of the Exodus.
I mean, just think about it for a second. Why didn't Egypt record the Exodus? If a nation lost a huge chunk of its labor force, suffered through devastating plagues, and literally watched its army perish, why on earth is an event of that magnitude completely missing from the walls of Egyptian temples? It just feels totally counterintuitive to our modern minds, doesn't it? We're so used to absolutely everything being documented.
Well, the answer actually lies in this mind-blowing Egyptian philosophy about record-keeping. To the ancient Egyptians, words weren't just descriptions. They came directly from the gods. They held literal, tangible power. Because of that, writing down a terrible defeat meant giving that defeat power and risking that the event might actually happen again. So they literally erased or just never recorded their defeats. In their mindset, if it's not written down, well, it's as if the humiliation never occurred at all. Crazy, right?
So, untangling this isn't just some abstract exercise. We're trying to anchor one of history's most famous events to reality. And practically speaking, there are solid physical reasons for this missing evidence. For one, the Israelites primarily settled in the Nile Delta. That's a region where centuries of damp mudflats have completely wiped away physical evidence, like papyrus or basic dwellings. Plus, the Israelites were really just a fraction of a much larger Asiatic slave labor force. Egypt didn't even view them as a specific distinct nation until around 1220 BC. And finally, and this is a really crucial point, no nation invents a shameful origin story. People simply don't fabricate a history of starting out as oppressed slaves unless there's a strong kernel of truth to it.
All right, let's see how this all builds by setting up our chronological baseline in Section 2, Mapping the New Kingdom.
Let's walk through this broader timeline together. Notice the Old Kingdom right there. This is when the famous pyramids at Giza were actually built. That means those monumental structures were already standing long before the biblical patriarch Abraham ever even traveled to Egypt. Jump ahead past the Middle Kingdom and we hit the era of the Hyksos. These were foreign shepherd kings who controlled Egypt until about 1550 BC. They were deeply hated by the native Egyptians, and they were finally booted out by Pharaoh Ahmose, who officially kicks off the era we call the New Kingdom.
So here's the crucial takeaway. Our mystery is successfully narrowed down, because no matter which theory scholars prefer, practically everyone agrees the Exodus event falls squarely within this New Kingdom period. But the massive question still remains. Which specific dynasty does it belong to? And that perfectly sets the stage for our two competing academic theories.
Which brings us to Section 3, the case for the early date. This theory leans heavily on the 18th dynasty rulers and a very specific mathematical clue found directly in the biblical text. Let's look at the math. Our vital clue comes right out of 1 Kings 6:1. It states that the temple began construction in the 480th year after the Israelites came out of Egypt, during the 4th year of King Solomon's reign. Now, thanks to fixed astronomical benchmarks in history, like the Assyrian eclipse of 763 BC, historians can confidently pin the beginning of Solomon's temple construction to the exact year of 966 BC.
And the math here is just brilliantly simple. If you take that anchor date of 966 BC and literally just add the 480 years mentioned in the text, it lands us squarely at an Exodus date of 1446 BC. Boom.
Now, if we match this 1446 BC date to the Egyptian historical record, it perfectly aligns with the rulers of the 18th dynasty. Think about it. If Moses was 80 years old at the time of the Exodus, counting backward places his birth right during the reign of Thutmose I. Moses would have fled Egypt under the powerful Thutmose III, and he would have returned to face Amenhotep II, making him the actual pharaoh of the Exodus. It creates this remarkably tight, seamless timeline.
And what's especially fun about this 18th dynasty timeline is the potential role of Hatshepsut. She was this incredibly powerful female co-regent who had her own massive mortuary temple and depicted herself being crowned by the gods. If Moses was born under Thutmose I, Hatshepsut would have been the princess with enough sheer chutzpah and political clout to completely defy her father's murderous edict and pull a Hebrew baby out of the Nile River.
But the early date doesn't just rely on that one verse. It points to a lot of corroborating biblical evidence, too. For example, 1 Chronicles 6 lists 18 generations between the Exodus and King David. Well, if a generation is roughly 25 years, 18 times 25 is about 450 years, which matches our timeline. Furthermore, over in the book of Judges, a leader named Jephthah, who lived around 1100 BC, claims that Israel had already been living in their cities for 300 years. 1100 plus 300 gets us right back to 1400 BC, which perfectly accounts for the Exodus and the 40 years of wilderness wandering.
But what if those numbers aren't actually meant to be read like a strict math equation? That brings us to Section 4, the case for the late date.
Let's anchor ourselves chronologically here. We are pitting the early date, that 1446 BC timeline, happening during the 18th dynasty, directly against the late date, which shifts the whole event forward by a couple of centuries to roughly 1250 BC, placing it squarely in the 19th dynasty. And this debate really matters because it radically changes which monuments, which wars, and which specific pharaohs serve as the true historical backdrop to the Israelite story.
So the absolute biggest textual clue for the late-date theorist comes from the very first chapter of Exodus. It specifically states that the Israelite slaves were put to forced labor and built the store cities of Pithom and Ramesses. For a lot of scholars, the specific naming of the city of Ramesses points the finger directly at one very specific, very famous pharaoh.
And that pharaoh is Ramses II. He was a monumental 19th dynasty builder, known for his incredibly long reign, his massive ego, and an unprecedented portfolio of building projects. I mean, he left his footprints all over Egypt, from giant temples cut directly into the rock face to 67-foot-tall statues of himself. You can actually still see his mummy in Cairo today, which is wild. Because he was such a prolific builder, late-date theorists argue he is absolutely the prime suspect for the pharaoh of the oppression who commanded the building of a city bearing his own name. But what about the 480 years mentioned in 1 Kings? Well, late-date scholars point out that the number 40 is frequently used in ancient texts as a symbolic placeholder for a generation. So instead of a literal 480 years, they argue the text implies 12 symbolic generations. If you multiply those 12 generations by a more realistic 25 literal years per generation, the span completely transforms from 480 years down to a much shorter 300-year gap. And applying this mathematical reinterpretation brings us to our late-date stamp. An exodus occurring around 1250 BC seamlessly aligns with the timeline and the massive construction reign of Ramses II.
The late date is also supported by several key archaeological puzzle pieces. For instance, mid-20th century surveys by archaeologist Nelson Gluck found absolutely no evidence of the kingdoms of Edom and Moab in the 1400s, and those are the nations the Israelites supposedly encountered right after fleeing. Additionally, excavations in Israel reveal a major destruction layer, and surveys show a massive uptick in new hill country settlements right around 1200 BC. This perfectly fits a scenario where the Israelites leave Egypt in 1250 BC and conquer Canaan shortly after.
But the late date is tightly constrained by one undeniable, hard deadline, and that is the Merintop Stele, dating to about 1220 BC. It's a standing stone monument left by Pharaoh Merimta, who ruled right after Ramses II. On it, he literally boasts of a military victory over a people group specifically called Israel, located in the land of Canaan. This proves definitively that Israel was an established presence in the land by 1220 BC. So, if the late date is correct, it means the entire Exodus, the wilderness wandering, and the conquest all had to be completely wrapped up before this stone was carved.
So whether you lean toward the mathematical precision of the 1446 BC early date, or the archaeological and structural arguments of the 1250 BC late date, one thing is absolutely certain. History is profoundly shaped by royal egos, by those who write the monuments, and crucially, by those who refuse to write their defeats down. As you consider these varying timelines, ask yourself, does the fragility and bias of these ancient records change how you read history today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep exploring the past.